I just want to say a few words of introduction and welcome everyone who is either in the virtual room or in the physical room to this, the fifth presentation in Westchester University's Spring 2022 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. I'm Brad Flam. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability, and we are thrilled to co-sponsor this series with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. We have 7 more presentations after this one, so we invite all of you in the audience and our presenter to join us for other presentations this semester. But for now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Heather Wholey.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me okay? You can? Okay. So I'm Professor Heather Wholey. I'm Professor of Anthropology in the Department of Anthropology and Sociology, also the department chair. And I'm an archaeologist with specific training in cultural ecology, human paleoecology, and environmental archaeology. I'm just going to let you know right now that there will be some stray background noise. I'm sitting outside the Wilmington train station because I will be hopping on a train to Rhode Island right away. So I'm working with some colleagues up there and they happen to book me into a really, really tight situation. So anyway, just ignore the trucks and motorcycles and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with the talk. So I'm going to talk about global cultural heritage and drilling down from local heritage concerns from global heritage concerns to local heritage concerns, given the climate crisis that we are in. According to the United States Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, we also know as UNESCO, climate change is one of the defining issues of our time. The environmental impacts of climate change is affecting all aspects of life. Indeed, according to the International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, climate change is one of the fastest growing and significant threats to people and their cultural heritage across the globe. So when I say cultural heritage, I'm talking about things like archaeological sites, historic places, built monuments, cultural landscapes, and all of the intangible cultural meanings that are infused into those places and landscapes. Cultural heritage is our legacy from the past, and it informs our lives today. It's an irreplaceable source of cultural knowledge, and it's the inspiration that we convey and transmit to future generations. It's a thread that binds us together. Connections to heritage arguably sustains community well-being, and this is really an emphasis that cultural heritage practitioners are making strongly now. And it arguably also builds resiliency for change among human societies. Climate change hazards, however, are challenging our understanding of permanence itself. And it's threatening the past that we value and wish to transmit to future generations. UNESCO has convened a working group to address threats from climate change to World Heritage properties. The World Heritage properties are considered important and iconic places that provide a sense of global heritage and belonging. And as such, these places must meet certain criteria for listing, to be monitored, and to be protected. So these criteria include outstanding value, meaning this could be a masterpiece, something that's considered a masterpiece of human creativity, or bear exceptional testimony of cultural tradition, and be an outstanding example of the built environment and human innovation. So under this criteria, masterpiece, exceptional, outstanding are the defining terms. So these places are extremely important, but this listing does not encompass the majority of our cultural heritage, the heritage of our everyday lives, and our lived experiences. Those places are equally threatened, or more so, you can argue, by the effects of climate change and deserve similar concern and attention. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to do a little bit of changing it up here. Let's see, go back up. And what I'm going to do is share some project work that I've been doing with various colleagues, both globally and locally. So what I'm bringing up right now is a story map that was created in ArcGIS Online. And I created this recently for the Society for Historical Archaeology, which is an international community of scholars primarily focused on like the colonial world. That's not actually my area of emphasis, but climate change transcends all time periods and all people. So I am involved in this organization through their Heritage at Risk Committee. And this story map is a case study of climate change impacts across the world, and it's something that we're hoping to use as a launch pad to build out different case studies. So you see that we mentioned from an archaeological perspective, we're concerned globally about the impacts and the rate of climate change as it impacts these heritage sites and also the communities that are invested in these heritage places. If I scroll down here, you'll see what I have here is our actual map tour. This is a map tour that shows places that are featured, that people have contributed their case studies, the work that they're doing in various areas of the world. So we have, for example, Alaska. Alaska and the Arctic region is facing these impacts at an extremely, shockingly fast rate. So this project is at the Arctic Circle. It's a community-based coastal observation network. All of these projects are community-based, they're grassroots, they involve community engagement. And this is a project where community members are trained to take baseline measurements and monitor things like weather, waves, wind, soil, and things like that. And so you can see the area of interest shown up here at number 1, and some of the things that the community's engaged with in terms of monitoring, but also recovering scientific and cultural information before it is destroyed, forever. We have several case studies along the East Coast. The East Coast I'll talk about in a little bit, but is experiencing the effects of climate change faster than anywhere else in the in almost the Northern Hemisphere. And so here we have in Maine, this is an indigenous people's occupation. And this shell midden here, you could see the height of it, retains cultural and scientific knowledge and evidence that it covers thousands of years, and it's rapidly eroding out and will be no longer available for people to engage with culturally or scientifically. Again, in Maine, we have this schooner. This is a wreck, 145-foot, 560-ton schooner that was submerged off of a reef while transporting coal back in the late 19th century. This schooner is exposed by low tides and then again inundated at high tide, and that tidal action is really creating a good deal of instability in terms of the long-term integrity of that particular shipwreck. And this is considered important for our understanding of transatlantic trade during the industrialization period. If we go on down, I'm going to skip this because that's my case study. I'll come back to it later. It's in New Jersey. We have several case studies in Florida. And you'll see one here is Pocky Island. This is Pocky Island. This is also an indigenous cultural heritage site. It's being battered from both sides, the back marsh and the front coast, and is eminently in danger of washing out to the sea. Let's move on down. And you all are following this, right? You all are with me on this, seeing everything. And again, similar on the coast of Florida. Down here in the Caribbean, we have a plantation site that's being battered by hurricanes, and the frequency of hurricanes and the intensity of hurricanes is really undermining the integrity of this plantation site. The Society for Black Archaeologists has set up a long-term project here to do things like record rising sea levels, take measurements on the effects of earthquakes and hurricanes, There, this property itself has sustained the most damage or recent damage in the 2018 and 2019 hurricanes. It's a Danish sugar plantation, about 200 acres that housed 141 enslaved Africans. It's currently where the Nature Conservancy of the U.S. Virgin Islands has established their headquarters, so they have an archives there, and other things like that. If we jump over to the other side of the pond, we have up here in the Shetland Islands the site of Fethaland. And this was a fishing community that, again, tells the story of a local tradition that has been, that is sustained by in present day times, by a very small community of people who retain that traditional knowledge. So this project is using all kinds of digital modeling, which I'll talk about in a little bit, the effects of that, the importance of that. Again, if we're talking about industrialization on both sides of the pond, the Brora salt ponds is another location that scientists and preservationists are monitoring the effects of. Let's see, if we go down, what else do we have here? We've got fortresses in Ireland. You see how close this fortress is to the shoreline here. So in this case, it's the eroding shoreline that is damaging this fortress that dates, all the way, that predates, the medieval period. What else? Let's see. All right, so you'll see that, this is a global concern. If we look at this, though, we can also see that there's something missing here. I don't know if anybody in the audience wants to chime in what they think is missing from this and what our next steps are in addressing these concerns. Anybody from the audience feel like chiming in? See if I can see. The representation is all Northern Hemisphere. There's nothing from the global South, right? And so and this is a real issue in getting representation for the global South, who are facing, just as serious threats from these different climate impacts. So that is a move that we're working on. We'll be working on this July with the World Archaeological Congress, is to find ways to engage with our colleagues in the global South. All right, so I'm going to bring up, did somebody say they had a question? All right. I'm going to change gears here again. Okay. Okay. So I had said that I was not going to review that one case study from New Jersey, because this relates to a project that I'm drilling down to. So we have these global concerns. We talked about, I just mentioned the significance at the local level as well. This story map here illustrates a more localized project that's in our backyard practically, down by the Delaware Bay, down by the bay. So you see the title of this story map, Down by the Bay, and the heading, thousands of years, literally 10,000 years or more, of cultural heritage is being lost to the similar types of effects. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to go over our story map and then talk a little bit about the interdisciplinary approach that we're taking in this project. So the Delaware Bay is the second largest estuary along the U.S. Atlantic coast. It has some of the largest intact parcels of salt marsh fringing its coastline. This is really significant. The salt marshes are the protective buffers that protect the dry land from, erosion and inundation from the sea or from the bay in this case. The Delaware Bay wetlands are designated Ramsar wetlands of international importance, so that means they provide critical habitats for fisheries, for all variety of terrestrial wildlife, migratory shorebirds, horseshoe crabs, etc. This is one of the largest, one of the most important parts of the Atlantic flyway for a number of different migratory shorebirds. These wetlands are large carbon storing ecosystems. So their loss is really important in the whole cycle of global climate change. They filter pollutants from runoff, from terrestrial runoff into the water, so they protect the waterways. They buffer the shore from things like erosion, storm surge, tidal inundation, sea level rise, etc. For many years, at least up until the last, less than a decade, cultural preservationists, historians, archaeologists, etc., have sort of written off these intertidal zones as having no resources that are significant for cultural heritage. We've demonstrated through this project that that's not the case at all, in fact. So some of the reasons why this area is so challenged is partly due to the topography. A lot of the shoreline is at an elevation of a meter or less. And so therefore, the sea level rise is happening at a pretty quick rate. These marshes are being lost at approximately an acre per day. So while many places along the Atlantic coast are experiencing high rates of relative sea level rise, higher than the global average, in fact, the Delaware Bay is experiencing some of the gravest and most rapid effects, partly due to the low mean elevation, but also due to the position near the forebulge of the Laurentide ice sheet. So because of glacial ice melt, it's also experiencing this rapid effects from sea level rise. The bay shore encompasses 830 square kilometers of tidal marsh, as I mentioned. They've been forming for the last 2,000 years, but now we're seeing tremendous amounts of loss. And here's you can see in this image here, the sort of dying marsh. This marsh is being essentially converted into mud flats. So I'll talk a little bit more, we use in our project models from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They just produced their most recent report, the 6th assessment report just came out, hot off the press, in fact. Our models use this IPPC approach, which is based on different gas emission scenarios, greenhouse gases. And so you can see here that we have the bay shoreline, we have modeled at every decade almost. We could model it every decade. It's just a tremendous amount of work to do this. But we have 2030, 2050, 2080, 2100, the relative sea level rise along the bay. And when we show here, we're showing low probability on the far left, low probability. Low probability means that we make tremendous amount of changes that will impact the amount of gas emissions in the atmosphere. We have intermediate probability scenarios right here. And then on the far right, we have the high probability scenario. High probability does not mean it's the most likely to happen or the highest probability. It means that it has the highest impact of change. And this is basically if we go along business as usual and there's no alteration in gas emissions into the atmosphere. So you can see there's actually decision, and according to using these IPPC models, there's this human behavior has a significant impact on the outcomes. So here I'm showing one of our case studies along New Jersey. This is the East Point Peninsula. The lighthouse right here, if you can see my cursor, is one of the defining characteristics of this landform, but this landform has been inhabited by at least 10,000 years. And we see the different scenario outcomes, low, high, and medium of this landscape depending on, the gas emission situation. Down here in Lewis, we have early Dutch whaling communities, early Dutch colonial settlements, and again, similar differences in outcomes to that landform. Cape May, most people are familiar with Cape May, right across the bay. So I'm going to stop here. Oh, okay, I'm going to show you this, our heat map here. So all of the known documented cultural resources overlain with our sea level rise scenarios. So you can see that there's a tremendous amount of cultural heritage in this region. I'm going to come back to this. Okay. So the story maps are attempts at making what we're working on friendly to the public, right? Doing scientific research and doing, cultural studies is very important, but it really needs to be engaging to the public. It's the public who has, meaning, non-researchers, anybody who's interested, has the ability to make changes and to leverage their interests. Let me just go back for a second. So the Delaware Bay Climate and Archaeology Project is how we've been doing our work. We established this in 2017. We've been able to keep it going, keep it alive with funding from the Westchester University Foundation, the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and National Geographic Society. And you see here we are on this map in the Delaware Bay area with these rates of sea level rise being the hot spot right up in this Bay area. So the objectives of this project have been to develop models for examining the climate change threats to cultural resources in the intertidal zone of the Bay, particularly with emphasis on sea level rise, storm surges, coastal erosion, and salt marsh disintegration. For the storm surge, we've collaborated. This is an interdisciplinary project. I'm co-PI with Dr. Nicotina from the Department of Earth and Space Sciences, and we've had guest scholarship by Dr. Yun-Hoon Kim from the Department of Earth and Space Sciences and Dr. Megan Heckert from the Department of Geography and Planning. So here to model and look at the effects of storm surge, we've applied this simulation model called the Sea, Lake, and Overland Surges from Hurricanes, or SLOSH model simulation. Sea level rise, this is our actual data that we converted into the story map I showed you. You see all of these different sites, locations in green, cultural heritage places in green. The red ones are threatened. Sea level rise using the IPCC gas emission scenarios that I talked about. And then marsh disintegration. So you see what we have here are these ponds that we've been monitoring with groundwater monitoring wells. And what we see is that over the course of a couple of seasons, they are both growing. These ponds are both growing, and the smaller ones are joining together to form bigger ones. So what this is telling us is that the marsh is being converted into open water. All of this is done with students, undergraduates and graduate students. And we work with students in doing field work, doing lab work. Students from archaeology, geology, geography, and biology have been involved in the project in all phases. The interdisciplinary approach that we take, in addition to these modeling that I've just discussed, involves a tremendous amount of GIS work, archaeological survey, drone flyovers, LIDAR or light detected radar imaging, marsh sediment collection, shoreline monitoring, etc. Every summer we run our field program. Students can register for this. They get course credit for it, and they spend about 4.5 weeks intensely engaged in doing field work with us. So in general, the work that we've been doing indicates that despite what seems like a relative homogeneity of the surface topography, it's all about 1 meter or less, that the impacts that we're seeing from climate change and that we can predict to see from climate change are surprisingly variable. And in large part, this is due to the ancestral landscape, as well as human activities. We consider nature-based remediation programs to be the most sustainable mitigation strategies. This includes things like ditch remediation, marsh restoration, and the construction of living shorelines. There are a couple of these projects already going on or being piloted in the Delaware Bay region. One of these is with the Delaware Center for the Estuary and the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. This one I'm showing right now involves ditch remediation. So all throughout the Works Project administration, as a way to put people to work, the federal government employed people to go out into these marshes and ditch them. And the idea was that they were going to be managing mosquito populations. In fact, the opposite happened, and the mosquito populations got worse because of this. So ditch remediation involves a multi-year process of infilling these ditches. It's a very complicated procedure, throwing in or building up the natural vegetation over time. And you can see over a 3-year period the difference that it can make in restoring the health of these marshes. Let's see, next. Okay, here we go. Another project is has been undertaken by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency. This is the largest marsh restoration project to date, and it's taken place at the Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge in Delaware. And you can see here that this marsh was blown out, mostly due to storm surge and hurricanes. And the project down here involves rebuilding the marsh with the natural vegetation. Again, somewhat long-term undertaking and quite expensive for that matter. This project is one of my favorites, the Give a Shuck project, this oyster shell recycling program, which is being undertaken by the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. And this involves constructing artificial reefs using things like native wetland plants, natural structures, recycling shellfish, primarily oyster. They'll go around to restaurants. Restaurants will donate, all of their cast-off oyster shells, and then use that to build these artificial reef structures to protect the shoreline and the back area. Another one here. This is our project area that I showed you, the one that was the lighthouse, the 10,000-year-old settlement area. And this was undertaken by the American Littoral Society. This one has been problematic. This is not using like a nature-based, this one in the bottom left is not using a nature-based strategy. It's putting in this artificial geotubing. After going back and seeing the artificial geotubing completed, it's clear that there are definite problems for this that affect wildlife. Horseshoe crabs are a very important resource to this area, and when they make their way to shore, they find themselves trapped behind that geotubing, and we saw literally hundreds of them trapped and dying behind that geotubing. So this is not, the bottom left is not what we would consider to be sustainable compared to the other ones I just mentioned. Sometimes these places, we just have to find ways to say goodbye to important cultural places because of loss is just unavoidable. So we've undertaken, in such case, we're starting to undertake, I should say, in such case, digital forms of preservation that include things like 3D photogrammetry, drone flyovers. So the bottom right was like our first drone flyover. It's kind of like it's not that pretty. We've done better since our subsequent drone flyovers, and 3D GIS. And so then these are ways to, again, sustainably preserve the cultural heritage that we wish to have for future generations, just in a different format. And again, whoops, I'm sorry. And then these are all projects undertaken by students, every one that I've shown you. This right here is a 3D GIS project. It's the first one that we've done, that we did. This is student driven. We need to go back with this student and slow this simulation down. But otherwise you can see the shoreline spinning around, the dune system that is barely even there, and then a structure here that houses, I'll stop. It's a curation facility that houses cultural materials. It's like a spillover curation facility for the museums down in Delaware. So all of the materials that are being stored there are at threat. They need to be moved unless there's some sort of remediation strategy for building up that dune and protecting the landscape behind it. So I'd like to see if there are any questions from anybody out there in the virtual or physical audience. One of the things that I think I'd like to emphasize in closing is that, you know, I'm an archaeologist, and a lot of people really think that the archaeologists work in the past. We work for the past, but just as much, if not more so, than many other sciences, we're working for the future of our cultural heritage, for the future of our legacy, and our shared, cultural resources. And that's the reason for undertaking this work. If we were working for the past, we would just we wouldn't care, and we would just let it all go away.
Thank you very much. I think we probably have some questions here, but if someone in the Zoom room would like to
or
go
chat,
first,
chat is fine too.
Well, I have kind of I think it's a big picture question. Are the challenges that you've been describing in this presentation today an exacerbation of problems that always exist, or is climate change causing entirely new problems for archaeology?
It's doing both. So we know that climates have changed throughout the past. I mean, we have a long-term record of human-environmental interactions. You know, we have archaeological evidence of people, facing drought at, AD 1200, and all sorts of other climate events and climate trends. We know that climate has changed throughout time, but what's happening now is new. It's creating a whole new set of challenges in terms of the rate is just it's very alarming. And the rate is making us decide what do we do here? If not all of our human cultural heritage can be salvaged, how do we decide what's important? That's the big challenge. And that's why we have to engage with communities, because communities say what's important, right? So that's really what's made it so different. I mean, we have to find new ways of salvaging quickly. And if we are salvaging quickly, what are we going to do with the materials that we're salvaging? I mean, are we going to put it in a museum? And if we do, museums are going to they're already in crisis. There's no space for all kinds of new, materials. So it really has to be, there's a lot of thought and collaboration that we need to get our head around doing. Yep, thanks for that question, Brad.
And if I can just follow up with a question, do you think that archaeologists have traditionally been trained in those kinds of community engagement skills? Because I would imagine that it's pushing you to develop skills that might not have been part of your toolkit in the past.
So two things are different. One is that professionally, it's been part of our professional ethics to preserve in place, to not go digging stuff up, right? Because once we do it, it never goes back, right? So our professional ethics guides us to test, find out, do as little invasive work as we can to find out what we need, And now the and now it's a new challenge. Well, if we do that, will we may be sacrificing our ability to learn in the future because we will have lost that opportunity. So it's challenging us to rethink our ethics about preservation and place. But in terms of what you asked about communication, more or less, I mean, so archaeologists have really always engaged with the public in one way or another. What it's challenging us to do is rethink how we do it and who it's for. So I'll give you an example. I'm working on a project with the Heritage at Risk group to examine our own language. Actually, I have a student working on this for her senior project. So we have these blogs, and she's taking all of our blogs and she's running it through like word clouds, and she's examining it for jargon, and her purpose or her goal is to see ways in which communication is just falling short, where we really think we're talking to the public and communicating to the public, but what we're doing actually is just talking to ourselves again, So she's examining like the language that we use. We take things for granted. Like when I say cultural heritage, I take it for granted that people know what I mean. What I mean is really pretty broad. I mean, there's intangible cultural heritage that we include in there as well, but we don't necessarily make that explicit. So it's really not that we have to get out of our comfort zone in engaging with the public. It's rethinking our communication style.
Yeah, I have a question just following up. Yeah, I was thinking the phrase salvage operation kept going through my mind, and you guys used that phrase. So does this crisis involve a wholesale shift in the field towards prioritizing coastline sites now?
No, I'm glad you asked that. I'm presenting coastline stuff because I'm a coastline person. However, one of my best friends is a mountain person. And so she's seeing all sorts of things like mass wasting, through like landslides and mudslides, and then, forest fires that are out of control. So and drought in, other places that is being exacerbated through, the effects of climate change. So that's another thing in terms of our map tour that I presented. The big one is that it's very coastal focused, and not only do we want to expand to engage with the global south, our colleagues in the global south, but we want to represent those interior threats that are just as significant and alarming as the coastal threats. So it just so happens that I'm doing coastal stuff. But not all of us are.
Yeah, a lot of people make analogies for good reason between archaeology and paleontology. And a lot of paleontology I thought of as salvage operations anyway, because we're usually digging in erosive surfaces that from season to season change, and there can be a lot of data loss. And sometimes it's just hit or miss or matter of luck, even though you focus on areas that are of a particular deposition type and time period.
So one of the things about the concept of doing salvage is that it really comes back to community. So, I mean, I have engagements with a few different tribal communities, Native American tribal communities, and it's so diverse. The responses are so diverse, just as they would be with any population. Some communities say this is really a landscape that is sacred and important to us, and it's not the stuff, it's the land, right? And we value that landscape. Other communities will say this is the course of nature. Nature gives and nature takes, and it's going to go away. So, that's where engaging with the communities is really key.
You mentioned that you wanted to engage more with the global south. Oh, hey, Dr. Wholey.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not in your class right now because
I know you're not going to be in my class because I'm going to be on a train to Rhode Island pretty soon.
yes, and I've been to the Wilmington train station, and it's not that great of a place to be doing a Zoom call.
I wouldn't do it. I would do it in, but they make you wear masks still, and I didn't want to present with a mask on.
Yeah, understandably. So my question is, what is being done to engage with, other groups in different countries and such? I know you said there was like a need to work with the global South, but it seems like there's a lot of communities that probably would be very welcoming. So like, what is being done?
So what's being done immediately is in July, there's a meeting in the Czech Republic of the World Archaeological Congress. And this is a world organization that purposefully engages with the global South. We have set up a convening of interested scholars to come together to talk through, from the global North and the global South, to talk through, to share information, to share concerns, to share knowledge. I have worked with some colleagues from Latin America, and one of the things that the convener of the World Archaeological Congress has said is that this is a significant issue for many people in the global South, but in some cases there are just other priorities, that like economic health, or in some cases, internal, conflict and strife, things that just seem to go to the top of the list and keep pushing the climate change down. And in other instances, there are communities of scholars that just don't have the same types of resources that we have in the global North to do the work. So we have, through the World Archaeological Congress, something that's called Archaeologists Without Borders. And it's to visit and to do things like set up lecture series and, give pro bono of our time and resources to colleagues that don't have the same resources that we do.
One more question here, if you have
Yep.
time before your train.
Yep.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just curious. I noticed just some of the pictures from earlier in the presentation. Do you have the opportunity to do field work with your students as like integrated into the classes that you teach? Just curious.
All the time.
Nice.
So students students can join in. Students can be a part of this. So they can go in the field with us in the summer. Like this summer, we'll be out in the field May 16th through June 17th. We have space for graduate and undergraduate students. We have students from other universities come as well. And then the people who are engaged in this interdisciplinary project will incorporate different facets of this work into traditional coursework, like classroom coursework. So students can continue to, if they do field work with us and they really like a certain aspect of it, or they want to do their senior project on some aspect of it, they can keep working with us. I mean, this project would not be possible without students. Definitely.
Well, we're almost at 12:50, so we don't want to keep you from your train.
Okay.
But a quick round of applause for those of us.
Oh, and by the way, this is one of the areas where we work behind us. That's our environment, the intertidal zone. That's one of our project areas.
Thank you so much for making time and for doing this.
Sure.
In what might be less than ideal circumstances outside the Wilmington train station.
That's okay. It worked.
Yep. Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
it did. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.